In 1980, 4 years at an average American state university cost about $2,500 in total tuition. The median starting salary for a college graduate that year was around $13,000. A graduate could pay off their entire 4-year degree with roughly 2 months of starting salary. In 2026, 4 years at the same kind of state university costs over $100,000 in total tuition. The median starting salary for a college graduate today is around $60,000. A graduate now needs roughly 20 months of starting salary just to break even on tuition before they have spent a single dollar on rent, food, or anything else. Same country, same level of degree, completely different math. And the difference has nothing to do with universities providing dramatically better education, nothing to do with students being lazier, and nothing to do with degrees being worth more than they used to be. It has everything to do with a structural redesign of who pays for higher education and on what terms. A redesign nobody officially announced, and almost nobody has explained clearly until now. The popular advice that built modern America was that a college degree was the surest path to the middle class. Work hard in high school, get into a good school, take out the loans, get the degree, and the degree will more than pay for itself. For about 40 years, that advice was mathematically correct. The earnings premium of a degree reliably exceeded the cost of getting one. Today, that math has quietly inverted for millions of graduates. The degree still pays a premium, but the cost now consumes the premium faster than the premium accumulates. And once you understand how that inversion happened, you'll never look at a college brochure the same way again. So it is time to learn how money works, to find out why the most reliable wealth-building strategy of the 20th century became a structural wealth extraction system in the 21st. Okay, so the first thing to understand is that until 1976, student loans behaved like every other consumer loan. If a borrower could not pay, they could discharge the debt in bankruptcy, the same way they could discharge credit card debt or medical debt. That single legal feature acted as a natural ceiling on how much universities could charge and how much banks were willing to lend. If tuition got too expensive, borrowers would default, banks would lose money, and the entire system would self-correct. In 1976, Congress made federal student loans non-dischargeable in bankruptcy. In 2005, that protection was extended to private student loans as well. What that means, in plain English, is that for the first time in American history, a single category of consumer debt was made permanently inescapable. You can declare bankruptcy after losing a business, after a catastrophic medical event, after a divorce, after a casino addiction. You cannot declare bankruptcy on student debt. Once that change happened, the natural ceiling on how much universities could charge was removed entirely, and the price of college began rising at roughly 3 times the rate of inflation every year for 50 years straight. Which brings us to problem number 2. When tuition costs are guaranteed to be paid, the universities lose all incentive to control costs. Why would a university make hard choices about administrative bloat when it can simply raise tuition, and the students will be forced to borrow the difference? The numbers on this are brutal. In 1980, the average American university had roughly 1 administrator for every 3 full-time faculty members. By 2026, that ratio has flipped. The average American university now has more administrators than faculty. The growth in college costs over the last 40 years has gone overwhelmingly to administrative expansion, luxury campus facilities, athletic complexes, marketing budgets, and executive compensation packages that increasingly resemble those of corporate CEOs. The actual teaching, the only thing students supposedly pay for, has not gotten dramatically better. The university president of a major state school in 1980 made roughly 4 times the salary of a tenured professor. Today, that ratio is closer to 15 times, and that is before counting bonuses, deferred compensation, and consulting fees. You are not paying more for a better education. You are paying more for an administrative class that did not exist at this scale 50 years ago. And this brings us to the third problem, which is the cruelest part of the cycle. The popular argument for taking on student debt is that a degree leads to higher lifetime earnings. And that is statistically still true on average. But averages hide a brutal truth about how the earnings premium gets distributed. A graduate from a top-tier private university in a high-paying field still earns a significant premium that justifies the cost. A graduate from a regional state school in a low-paying field often earns barely more than a high school graduate, while carrying a debt load that the high school graduate does not have. For roughly 1/3 of all current student loan borrowers, the lifetime earnings premium of their degree is now smaller than the total cost of obtaining it. Those graduates were not lazy. They were not foolish. They followed advice that was correct for an entire previous generation and arrived at the doorway of a different economy that quietly closed behind them. Now here's the part nobody at any university administrator's office really wants to say out loud. The American student loan system was designed to transfer the cost of higher education from state governments and employers to individual 18-year-olds and their families. In 1980, state appropriations covered roughly 75% of the operating costs of public universities. By 2026, that number is closer to 25%. That missing 50% did not disappear. It got transferred onto the personal balance sheets of young adults who were legally able to sign loan documents, but not legally able to drink alcohol when they signed them. The system isn't broken. It is working exactly as designed for the people who designed it. The fact that it transferred a public good into a private debt obligation that cannot be discharged in bankruptcy is not a bug. It is the entire business model. So when someone tells you that a college degree is still worth it, they are not lying, exactly, but they are using statistics from a different economy that no longer fully applies to yours. The advice your parents got was mathematically correct. The advice they passed on to you was not updated to reflect that the cost structure of higher education was fundamentally redesigned during their working years. The harder you work to earn the degree, the more likely you are to discover that the degree was the cheapest part of the transaction. That is not a personal failing. That is the math of an industry that was redesigned to extract from young adults who were sold a vision of upward mobility that the system had already engineered around them. If you want to understand which other 20th century life advice no longer applies to anyone born after 1985, go and watch this video next. And don't forget to like and subscribe to keep on learning how money works.